Mary. So mine was titled, I was tasked with talking about Turtle Island and what it means. And I went through a whole lot of centering, I guess would be the word. So mine is Turtle Island, the indigenous name for North America, otherwise known as We Love Our Mother. And again, I am Andrea Pierce, Little Traverse Bay Band of Wadala Indian citizen, chair and founder of the Anishinaabe Caucus, and I'm an Indigenous water protector. Okay, so what is Turtle Island? And there, isn't that neat? And if you look at it, it looks like in the Americas. And I think I got another picture later and it superimposes it. But Turtle Island is a name that many indigenous people use to describe and talk about North America. And we'll say it all the time. Oh, Turtle Island. And it's a common term. And the term comes from our creation stories, especially among the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, which is the Iroquois Confederacy, and other nations. All throughout the Americas, we use this. I've gone to Canada and they've called it Turtle Island. In Mexico, they've called it Turtle Island in their language. So it reflects a spiritual, cultural, and ecological relationship with the land. Because now it's not just the land, we've given it a name. It's, to us it moves. It's a turtle. Turtle to us is Mashike, which is medicine. And always remember that the indigenous people are the stewards of the land. It's our job to take care of it. When an indigenous person says, you're hurting this land here, you're hurting the water, you're hurting the air, you need to stop and listen because we have what's called blood memory. It's like you're inherently taught things that we didn't know. And there are certain words or actions will trigger those teachings. And we talk to our medicine people and we learn more. So we have that. And that's part of our role in the world is to take care of the land, the water, and the sky. So Turtle Island started from our creation story. So there's a nice little, well, not really nice, it's really kind of sad, but it was impactful and really kind of inspiring. What happened was after the Great Flood, a few beings survived, right? Not a lot, it's just a few of them. And they were standing on turtles' back. And animals were different way back then, right? So they're standing on turtles' back, and there was a few of them, and they're like floating around, and they're like getting nervous and worried. There's no food there. What are we going to do? We got to survive. How are we going to fix this? So they tried to dive down. There's got to be land somewhere. Let's go down and see how far the land is. So they took turns swimming down. Some made it back, and some didn't, because they were going so far down trying to find the land because it was the big flood, right? And so they taking turns going down. I think Duck tried, got so far and come back puffing and puffing. Like I said, a few of them didn't make it. So what happened was Muskrat, he jumps off, he says, my turn, I'm going to do this. And he dove into the water and went down as far as he possibly could. And he's swimming and swimming and swimming. And he grabs the land, he got it. And he comes up and he's holding it in his hand. But he died before he made it. And he floats to the top. He's still holding that piece of earth. And the animals come and there he is, there he is. They try to get him, they try to save him, and they couldn't, but they got that earth. And they put it on the turtle's back. And then we grew. From there, the land grew. And that's where North America came from. That was our creation story here, was the animals saved us after the Great Flood, which is why we're very careful in how we treat animals too. And the story teaches humility, bravery, and unity because they all work together. All those animals, nobody said, I got this, me go do it. They all took their turns. They were scared. They already saw, their brothers and sisters pass, but they got to try to save themselves, try to find Earth. So that's there, and they all work together. So even the smallest creatures can work together and accomplish great and wonderful things. And this is sacred knowledge among our people. We go all over Turtle Island and we'll hear the story. It's not a myth. This is real. This is what our people believe. And like I said, many tribes on Turtle Island have the same story. It's really kind of cool. I go to listen to them at different different conferences, just to, if there's any differences, and there may be little ones, you know, which animal went down first, but it's always muskrat that saved us. So that's really kind of powerful. Okay, Mashike, like I said, is medicine. That's and he stands for patience and longevity. They'll live a long time, hundreds and hundreds of years. These turtles will last. When people come up with little pets and their turtles, I'm like, I hope you got them in your will because it's going to be in your family for a long, long time. You can be passing him down and take care of him because he's, you know, that's our wisdom. He represents the earth and the wisdom and protection because it carries its home on its back. So that's important. Turtle shells have 13 large sections in the middle. That represents, we had 13 months at one time. And around it is 28 because we had 28 days. So we could actually, back in before the clocks and when turtles were more abundant, we could actually tell, you know, where we were at by the turtle shell. I always thought that was kind of fascinating. So Turtle Island represents a view that sees the land as alive, sacred, and shared. Nobody owned it. All those animals were working towards saving it for all of us. And it's more than a name, it's a way of describing and understanding geography, ecology, and our community. Because they didn't just save it for them, they saved it for everyone. And it shows that we do have a relationship with the earth. It challenges the idea of discovery and highlights Indigenous precedents since the beginning of time. We say we have always been here, and we are still here. If anybody says that we weren't here or not here, you can point to any of us. Send them my way. But we are still here. Where numbers are low, but we are still here, and quite a few of us are fighting. So, what it means to me. To me, Turtle Island means that I need to protect it. I'm a land steward. I'm raised this way. I was taught this. This is one of the paintings from one of our pipe ups. The kids did it. And it shows all the animals taking apart the pipeline, working to save the earth again. And that struck me when I saw that. It gets me choked up when I look at it because I just see the little kids painting, and it was just so beautiful. The 4 colors, those represent just about the whole circle of our lives. It represents the directions, north, south, east, and west. It represents the people. It represents our ages, old, young, babies, and teenagers. It represents every faction of our life, those 4 colors do. And you see there's animals, there's reptiles, there's birds, all working together. Just like when they were trying to help get that Turtle Island and find that dirt.
How do you keep the young people together? Like in the 70s, this was the picture done by the children. How do you get the children together? Do you have gatherings together?
That's a good question, because as a water protector, when we call water protectors, when you say we need the water protectors to come and help us fix this water, help us protect this water, you're calling the women. The women are the ones that care for the water. And with us, we bring our children. So we'll do art builds, you know, we listen to our children. If one of the kids comes up and has an idea, we listen to that. We teach them. They teach us. It's that back and forth. We're not above them. We're a community. We're all on the same level. So they bring a different viewpoint than we have. But they are part of this. There'll be children at the pipe out paddle. All of our events have children there. And they're part of it. So this is what we're doing. We're protecting the land, water, the culture, traditions, and our sovereignty. If the water is gone, I'm a water-bearing person. So I'm from Upper Michigan, which is where the lakes are at. We're taught to fish. Okay, that's what we do. So we have fishing. Odawas are the traders. So we went around, you know, I say I'm the shopping Indian. So, because we're the traders. And we would trade fish for like whatever else we needed. So if we needed skins, we would trade fish for that. So if we destroy the water, we can't fish anymore. We lose that. My grandson won't learn how to spear fish. He won't know how good salmon are, or a Chinook. You know, we have our fish up north, whitefish, and his grandkids won't know that. That's part of that 7 generations and honoring them. We know they're coming. We got those generations are going to be here, and we need to keep it safe for them. Yes.
Is it taught in the public schools?
No, we're taught that we were discovered. Okay, and how do you discover people that are already here living and thriving?
Yeah.
You know, they were coming from a place where there was disease and pestilence and, you know, pandemics and hierarchical leadership, and we didn't have that. But they came here and thought they had a better life and genocided us. But we won't go into that. I'm keeping this on a nice level. So that's what we're working on. Yes.
How were they able to maintain 7 generations of story?
We didn't write down a lot of our language. We recently, in my generation, had a dictionary that I know of. Other than that, we were storytellers. In the wintertime, when it was cold, we heard all the old stories. We have people in our communities that go around and they tell the stories. So that's how we kept it going. Kind of different, huh?
Well, I mean, but I don't know 7 generations of my own family. And in the United States, that is something that I think is a rarity.
Right, because everybody,
7 generations. So, and a lot of that comes besides change social being. We change over years, maintain 7 generations. I mean, how long has that been going on? Because
forever, we have always been here.
there's change, so you don't have that.
Everybody else came here. Everybody else came. We were always here. So our 7 generations, I knew we had 5 until recently in my family. So then we just needed like a great grandma or a couple of greats to, you know, pass their stories on. I know stories about my great grandmother when they went to a dance and tripped over a cow. It was the funniest thing that they remembered, you know, when they were growing up. They snuck out to go to this dance and they were all dressed up going through the field and tripped over a cow, and you know how that ended up. So, so we were always here. I mean, how long have your people been here? How many generations?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't, and that's what I'm saying, that over years, society changes, and values should change. So,
Not always.
7 generations. I know that in some of the African traditions, there are some people that I know that are African, they could tell you 10 generations of their grandparents. But in America, kind of rough.
Yeah, that's part of that assimilation. You have to come here and learn what's going on here and forget about what happened back there. You know, some of the histories are really tragic. And they try that with us, right? We have removals. Boarding schools, yes. They weren't like what the rich people had. No, ours were full of torture.
Yeah.
But we've survived. I've come from, my grandparents were boarding school survivors. I told my mom, it means we're high. They took the ones that survived and made it, and now we're stronger. So that's where we're talking about colonization and resistance. So treaties were broken by settlers and governments. You'll learn about that in a little bit, some of the treaties. We had forced removals, boarding schools, cultural erasure, and mandatory assimilation. We were taught not to speak our language, not to practice our traditions. We weren't even considered citizens in our own country until like the 70s. We couldn't have our religions, couldn't do our dances. We got them now. So there have always been leaders like Tecumseh, Sitting Bull, Geronimo, and others. We have new leaders in our community. Here's a Water is Life Festival, protest for No DAPL, honor the treaties. This was here in Detroit, just recently during DAPL. So we have new leaders coming up, and we're growing them and we're teaching them and we're learning. So our land was defended through diplomacy, resistance, and survival. So environmental justice, like I said, we're the land stewards, so we're the guardians of the earth. Indigenous people protect 80% of the earth's biodiversity. We are protecting, we're doing our job. We need help though, can't do it all by ourselves, especially with all the genocide that's happened to us. Like 1% of the population, and we're protecting 80% of the earth. That's a lot of work. Our knowledge is key though to combating climate change. We know what to do. If you turn a bunch of natives loose on the earth and said, here, can you guys fix this? We probably could. Take a while, won't be done tomorrow or next week. But maybe in a generation, we'll have it all back to normal because Mother Earth will survive without us. Threats to the Turtle Island are pipelines, deforestation, mining, and corporate greed. Climate crisis disproportionately affects indigenous communities. They make sacrifice zones. They put them right on our lands where we are at living. And they affect us with missing, murdered indigenous women. We get poisoned the most. Our earth gets poisoned. Our waters. I told you about my mother. My mother lived on tribal lands, passed from PFAS contamination. So we have questions. I'm a little bit over though. I took a couple of questions already though, right? I am part of the Anishinaabe Caucus, the chair and founder. It's in Michigan. We're part of the Democratic Party because we figured if we can get involved in this, if you're not at the table, you're on the table. And I believe that they're feasting you. So we're part of this now. We're working in this party to try to make a difference. And it's worked on some levels. We have the pipeline, line 5 is operating illegally, which was big. Everybody said we couldn't get it shut down. So it's operating illegally. And Biden should have enforced it and shut it down, but he didn't. So now we're still fighting. You can join us here. Everybody can join the Anishinaabe Caucus as long as you're in Michigan and a Democrat, preferably. And because we don't discriminate. You can't be on our board, but we need you to be part of us. And there's an event coming up, so come and join us, if possible. And that's it. Any questions, or do I still have time for questions? Thank you. Okay, go ahead.
So I introduced the group before, but I didn't really introduce myself. My name's Mary Beth DeMarco. I live in northern Maine, where I'm the descendant of the settler colonial people that came from mostly England. My husband had one grandfather with an Italian last name, so that's where DeMarco comes from. So I come from people with a very different worldview from what Andrea has spoken about. And I was asked to give a brief history of the Doctrine of Discovery. So I'm going to count on the idea that you all are familiar with the basics of the Doctrine of Discovery, the papal bulls in the 15th century that gave the European monarchs permission to come across and appropriate the land for their own profit and use, as well as kill off mostly, and enslave the people that they found here. So I think that really those concepts have been mentioned already twice at the conference when Maria talked about the doctrine last night. And then Dr. Katab mentioned this morning about genocide, and never before in the history of the world have we had a genocide where about 90% of the people were killed off. But in fact, we have, and that was here. That was my people. So some things that I think Pax Christi people today need to know about the Doctrine of Discovery. I learned some from a lecture I attended with Dr. Dwayne Toma this summer. He's a language keeper and teacher for the Passamaquoddy tribe. And after showing us a film about the history of the doctrine, he said that the system of domination is working exactly the way it was and is meant to. And that much of what we've seen in Andrea's presentation, the extraction, the pipelines, the destruction of the environment, the extinction of many species of animals and plants, the erasure of cultures, is all part of that that was meant to happen. And he advised us not to expect that the system that's working so well is going to inform us about how it works. So we need to do that for ourselves, and to listen to people like Andrea explain how that's happening. So at our workshop in Washington, D.C. in 2022, we challenged Pax Christi members to learn more about the doctrine of discovery and the system of domination, precisely because it started with the Catholic Church. We asked you as individuals to listen to the voices of this land's original peoples, and to learn about the original inhabitants of the locations where you live, and then to repent and turn in a new direction. So the Indigenous Solidarity Working Group is trying to help that process along. There's a famous quote from Standing Rock Sioux scholar of mine, DeLorean. In his last essay, he asked, "At what point can we as peoples of creation look to Christianity to demand from the political structures of the world our dignity as human beings?" Maybe that time could start to be now. And he asks, at what point can we become men and not mere appendages of the Christian doctrine of discovery? Good questions. And Dr. Toma put it very simply. He said one simple request is that as Christians, we stop telling lies about the ceremonies of Indigenous people, that we stop seeing devil worship and calling it that and spreading that, because that furthers the erasure. And just before the 2022 conference, you might remember that Pope Francis visited Canada, and he visited the survivors of the boarding schools there, and issued an apology to them, which was very nice. And then sometime later, he disavowed the church of the doctrine of discovery. But Dr. Toma and other Indigenous leaders in the US and Canada call that a political stunt. So really, the institutional church can't take that back. They can't rescind the doctrine of discovery and all the harm that's come from it. But we are the body of the church, and we can take steps to repudiate it and dismantle it. That's the job that we're hoping workshops like this will put us in the direction of doing. So Carrie is going to talk to us a little bit and show a film about treaties and broken treaties, and then we'll hear from Melissa with some personal stories and some things we can actually do.
To know. I am Carrie Hansen, and I live on the ancestral homelands of the Oceti-Sakowee, which is South Dakota, the 7 council fires. And I have been part of this group since we began. I currently work for the Presentation Sisters of South Dakota as their justice contact. And one of the reasons that this is close to me is that I have done work with our Indigenous communities in South Dakota. We have 9 tribal reservations in our state. And so I have a particular interest in trying to bring justice to those areas. And I spent 13 years teaching nursing at a college on the reservation. And our sisters, a few years ago, in their chapter call, decided to hold up right relationships. And we started trying to heal relationships, learn more about relationships that we had done poorly or that we needed to improve. And we started with the Indigenous people, and it happened all about the same time as we were forming this group. So I have a very strong passion to be an ally for the Indigenous people of any place in the world. And part of my work with the sisters is I also work internationally with the International Presentation Association. And one of our 3 top priorities is Indigenous rights across the globe. So that's a little bit about me. We're going to start with this video so that you don't have to listen to me talk and tell you everything that's on the video, because it's not a perfect video, but it does talk about how the US government got the treaties, what the treaties did, the promises that were made and broken, and gives a really good history of that. And then we'll just hit a couple high points and then let Melissa carry on with the action portion.
In December of 2006, Hard Rock Inc., a massive international chain of restaurants, hotels, and casinos, was bought out for $900
Yeah, how did we get that?
Indigenous peoples have been present on the American continent for thousands of years. From 1778 to 1871, the United States government made over 500 treaties with indigenous nations. And all of these treaties have since been violated in one way or another, or completely broken by the American government. Even today, indigenous peoples and First Nations are still fighting for their treaty rights in federal courts and the United Nations. Here is the forgotten history of these broken treaties. In 1871, the United States House of Representatives stopped recognizing individual tribes as independent nations, thus ending the era of treaties. However, the existing treaties remained valid and enforceable. Until that time, indigenous nations were considered domestic and dependent tribes. The treaties between these tribes had to be approved by the American Congress. And that's how 374 treaties were ratified. Their primary objective was to guarantee peace, but these agreements also defined the boundaries of indigenous lands and ensured rights, including actual ownership of tribal lands, such as hunting and fishing rights, as well as the right to federal services like health and education. When we think about treaties, we might assume that both parties accept them and fully understand the terms and conditions. But, of course, that wasn't the case with the treaties signed between indigenous peoples and the United States government. So, what happens if one of the parties breaks the treaty? Would there be consequences? In reality, almost all the treaties signed at that time were broken. But how could this happen? And what does it mean for the lands taken under these treaties? A treaty is an agreement between two sovereign nations. If a country breaches this treaty, there will definitely be repercussions such as war, for example. In general, representatives from both countries create and approve the treaty. It is then presented to the respective legislative assemblies, which make the necessary amendments. Once the corrections are approved, both countries ratify the treaty, which then becomes law. When a country's legislative assemblies review a treaty, it is always written in their own language. This detail, which is not really a detail, will show one of the ways the American government trapped native leaders into signing treaties. A nation is sovereign when it is independent and can govern itself without outside interference. As one might assume, this is not how treaties were concluded between the American government and the First Nations. In 1494, and so, before America was created, a treaty between Spain and Portugal, called Tordesillas, established that Christian countries could colonize the state. They were governed by non-Christians if no European power had claimed them. It was then that in 1792, Thomas Jefferson declared that this treaty also applied to the United States. And that's how the Doctrine of Discovery was born, which made the genocide and forced displacement of Native Americans legal. In 1823, the Supreme Court declared that Native Americans only had the right to sell land to the government. The Doctrine of Discovery meant that once the British had supposedly discovered the territory in the 17th century, well, it no longer belonged to the First Nations, but to the British. When the American War of Independence against Great Britain ended, a treaty was signed in Paris. The British officially gave the territory to the American government. But what was the impact for the Native Americans who were already living there? In reality, there were of course no Native American representatives at the Treaty of Paris. This means that their lands had been ceded without their consent. Later on, George Washington, the first President of the United States, declared that Native American nations would not be allowed to revise treaties.
Ladies, listen up. The video showing the pink salt trick that melts belly fat while you sleep has already passed 21,000 views on TikTok.
By signing treaties with the First Nations, the United States government recognized their sovereignty. This meant that Native Americans needed documents to travel on these lands, as well as permission to use them. And, of course, this wasn't ideal for the American government, since the goal was to bring settlers onto the rich and fertile lands occupied by indigenous people. To access these lands, the government required Native Americans to sign treaties to acquire these territories. So how did the American government manage to get Native Americans to sign these treaties? Thomas Jefferson, the third President of the United